Just real quick review to help those who are listening online for sure. We talked about how Jesus made it very clear that two become one flesh, Mark 10:8, of course, Matthew 10. And because we become one flesh, it can confuse boundaries in marriage often. And I use two different words to help emphasize that. It's very different if we're trying to complete our spouse versus complement our spouse. To complete our spouse is unhealthy and dysfunctional. To complete means you have character deficiencies that your spouse has to make up for and vice versa. That is to complete them. That is not good. That is exhausting, that's dysfunctional, it is unstable. It makes the other person a means to an end, someone who's got to come fix you. It makes you, also puts you in a need-based relationship, and a need-based relationship, you're trying to survive. The only kind of relationship, there's only two kinds of relationship that should be need-based. Literal children to literal caretakers. And when you're an absolute invalid, I'm in the hospital and I'm in a need-based relationship with the physicians, nurses, doctors, whomever. Outside of that, no one in your life should need you. They might need things about your behavior, like I need you to respect my boundaries or we won't be close. But that's a circumstantial thing. It's not an ongoing thing. I sit at bed at night going, I need Bonnie to make sure she doesn't slap me. It just means in the moment, if she wants to be near me, she got to do that. But I don't need any emotional nutrients because I'm not a child. And at this very moment, I'm not an invalid. When adults do this, that's when it gets really messed up. They start completing each other and say, well, I need them. That is not healthy. So those are two things we don't make sure of completion. We don't want in our marriage. We do want to complement, where you bring your own self, capital S self, your strengths, your competencies, your giftedness by God gives you, your dreams, your desires, and you deliberately, metaphorically, Velcro together to say, I'm going to do life together with you. And yes, it might complement, you might marry, I'm an extrovert, let's say Elaine is not, let's say she's a little more introverted. It kind of complements that both of us aren't talking simultaneously all the time. You might, okay, sure. There's a little complement thing. That's not completing each other. So that's what the bottom of page 18, I say there are things that must not be completed by a spouse. Your spouse must not try to fix your incapacity to connect emotionally, to be vulnerable, share feelings, set boundaries, take initiative, process your own loss, practice grace, forgiveness, think independently, recognize, develop your own talents, etc., etc. You cannot be a healthy individual in a marriage ever and expect your spouse to come fix these things about you. You are wrong if that's what you expect. That's a boundary problem on your part. If you try to fix those things in your spouse's part, then you're wrong. You violated a boundary. Spouse is a human person, not an insta-mean to meet your needs. It's very important to understand those things. And so we talked about two areas where we're likely to mess this up. Feelings. When we don't take responsibility for our feelings, when we don't take responsibility, some examples of that would be our spouse has to read our minds, interpret our body language. You should have known what I was thinking and feeling. Didn't you see my face? That means you're expecting your spouse to fix your feelings. I was trying to communicate to you, and we blame our spouse for how we feel, what we do. We withhold communication. All that kind of stuff is what we expect our spouse to come rescue us. You have to think this way, which is hard. If you do this a lot, it's difficult, unless you're humble. If you're not humble, this is very difficult. Or if you struggle with shame, this is difficult. To admit, I have been acting like a baby toward my spouse. I didn't say I am. There's certain patterns. I act like a little infant toward my spouse. If I'm grumpy, I expected him or her to come rescue me, make me feel better, tell me a joke, give me a hug, tell me it's going to be okay. In that moment, I was an absolute little child, and I needed them to go rescue me. That's unhealthy. You need to grow up and learn how to process your own emotional states with therapy, reading books, on and on. Your spouse needs to be a support for you, but you don't need them to cheer you up or read your mind and so forth. And vice versa. We attempt to control other people's emotions when we try to rescue them. It's okay. I'll fix it. We suppress their emotions. Shut up, be quiet, I want to hear it. We discount their feelings. It's no big deal. Oh, my day at work was worse than yours. We punish them for having emotions. We guilt trip them. These are ways to try to get them to stop, to change. Desires, we talked about desires. Our desires are our desires, not their desires. We want to negotiate desires that are healthy. Little footnote, if you're in a marriage right now and your spouse doesn't care about your desires, your spouse isn't healthy. And they also don't really love you. They don't. They love themselves. They love their own desires. But no normal, healthy, agape-driven, that's agape Greek love, no normal, healthy, agape-driven person, Ephesians 5, deliberately decides, I don't care. Hey, I'd really like to spend some quality time with you before bed. Hey, I'd really like not to get drunk every weekend. Can we not go to the bars? Hey, I would love to spend some time talking about our dreams. And hey, I would love it sometimes if we could really just have good meals together. I don't care. You know how much I like to fish? You know how much I like horses? I'm just messing, Jennifer. We said the stuff I've heard not at all. I've heard a lot. That's a big red sign of the person who says, I don't care. That's a big sign of something else going on. That's weird. Why would you not care that your spouse said, I really desire? That's a healthy thing. The spouse doesn't say, I desire crack. It's quality time. It's open communication. It's bondedness and whatever. That's on. And so healthy spouses don't suppress their own desires to stay in a relationship. I didn't like looking at pornography, but that's what he said we had to do to be loved. He wouldn't leave me if I didn't make sure, if he didn't meet me. I had to stay with her or he wouldn't pay for her. That means that's manipulation. And I have on page 19 some bad examples of that. Some are deep, some are lightweight, some are big deal. But let me pause there. Any questions or comments about that before we move on to communication? Healthy spouses communicate their needs to adults, as adults. Healthy spouses communicate their needs as adults. Two very common, adult, I'm using transactional analysis terminology here. It means in my ego state as adult, I address the person at my needs, and I'll be clear what that means and as we go on. Two very common unhealthy communication patterns. I find these to be some of the most common, which is why I put these two here. The most common is the critical parent talking down to a child, using transactional analysis terms. That's when one spouse criticizes or judges or seeks to control the other spouse. In return, the child rebels against the critical parent by either throwing tantrums or being passive aggressive. The co-parent spouse often becomes exhausted from carrying the emotional and practical weight of the relationship, paying the bills, being on time, while the child spouse remains emotionally stunted, never developing the resilience and independence necessary for a thriving partnership. They just stay like a little baby. And it goes like this. It's, don't give the kids all that candy. It's not good for them. It won't hurt them. Just don't do it. And then mama leaves and goes, here you go. That's passive aggressive behavior. That's a child reacting. And then that parent, like a child, now is taking the side of the kids. Here you go, here you go. And what you teach the kids is what mom says doesn't matter because dads can give what we really want. And he's the fun parent and she's the big meanie. That's what that teaches. It also teaches very unhealthy, dysfunctional relationship. They watch spouses say one thing and do something else. It also teaches them that's what you're supposed to do in life yourself. Don't say what you need to say. Maybe let's talk about this. I think some candy is okay sometime. In fact, let's talk about this privately. Tell me understand from your perspective, what's so bad about candy? Can I understand more? And then she might say, well, it's because they have it morning, noon, and night. Oh, that's true. That's a lot. Let's don't do that. But I didn't see all the other candy. What about a little bit of candy? Is that okay? Yeah, that makes sense. How about after the candy, they can brush their teeth and not worry about cavities? Okay, that makes sense. Okay, good. Now let's do it. That's adults. That's adults. The example I just gave, I saw this all the time in one couples. I just shook, oh man. Okay, honey, sounds good. And they go buy it anyway. But when we talked about this, we need to have a budget. We don't have the money. Oh yeah, sure. One just fusses all the time, criticizes, well, you need a blah, blah. And if you get really good, what happens is one critical parent criticizes the child. If the child is either going to run off or get rebellious, or they themselves will immediately convert to their critical parent and start fussing. Well, you need to brush your teeth. You're ugly just like your mama. You don't tell me what to do. Well, you're ugly and don't tell. And then you have two critical parents fighting for submission. Who's going to be the first one to break? And when this gets escalated, At that level, you're fighting, which I'll talk about in a second. You're fighting. Then the goal is who's going to break first? You have left the realm of Christianity. You've left Christianity. All you're doing there is fleshly driven. My feelings are hurt, and I'm going to punish you because of it. This is the number one way I see couples interact when it's dysfunctional. Whether it's mild or it gets big, this is what happens. The passive aggressive is the second one. That's when you just don't talk much. You just punish your spouse by tuning them out, doing the opposite, checking out, distancing. You hear that? And so in a spousal relationship, they cannot technically abandon because you're not a child, but I would put abandonment in quotes. Abandonment is oftentimes a passive aggressive. I just tune out, check out, don't talk. That's very unhealthy. And that's it. Usually that's not both partners. Both can't be passive aggressive. It's usually one person going, can we talk about this? Now, might be a critical parent to a passive aggressive child. It's like, I've had it. All I do is get fussed at all the time. I'm sick and tired of it. They just check out. Sometimes they just have their own issues, or I don't want to talk about emotions. I don't want to talk about money. I just want to do what I want. It's just a very childish thing. Passive aggressiveness is very childish. Those are two common ways to do it. Well, what is the healthy way to do it? Well, healthy communication, of course, is not these things. Again, it's the first sentence. They communicate their needs. And maybe I should have said more about what healthy looks like, but I have a whole marriage workshop I cover this stuff on. But healthy communication exists when both spouses have communicated what they think and feel such that the other spouse fully understands it. You're not supposed to move on in the conversation. The other spouse says, do I hear you saying blank? And you go, you got it. Until the you got it stage, you're not ready to move. And we're teammates and we're married. I care absolutely about what you have to say about this issue on the table. I'm here to listen. Yes, go ahead. What's your point? Let's talk. That's what healthy people do. And you go back and forth till both people feel heard, validated, I appreciate, even if you disagree. I have a different view, but tell me more. Why is that? And then they negotiate. If there's a big deal, they might want to sleep on it. I want to make sure we both win here. Why? Because I love you and you love me. This is it. This ain't an argument. We're just talking about this negotiation. You can only do that if you're convinced that you're going to be heard, the other person can be heard. That is a little footnote. When you are scared, I've seen this 1 trillion times. When the person's scared that the other person won't listen to them, they come out of the gate already mad. They're already raised their voice, and they're just ready to fight. And I've always asked, by the time they're very heated in my room, on my couch, proverbially and literally, we work backwards. When you got to that point, I'm always saying, what's lit the fire? And without fail, I just really clear they're going to listen to me. They were already ready to, I've got to get his attention. I've got to scream. She said, if I don't get his attention, I've got to demean him. I've got to cuss. I've got to be, if you take away that fear, if you address the fear, they won't listen. By the spouse being a good listener, they just calm down. And usually with me, the therapist, they'll say, if I can get to that point, I can see it. Their whole body just starts melting. Their shoulders relax. If they will listen to my rules and one step at a time, then the person opens up. And usually the first thing, if it's really serious, first thing that happens when they start relaxing, start crying. And then we just stay with that. Okay, what makes you sad right now? And if I can get the other spouse to stop trying to be so defensive, they just listen. How do you feel and think about the sadness right now? Not their view that your spouse is crying about this issue. How do you feel about that? Well, it breaks my heart. I don't like to see it at all. How does it feel to hear that? They've never told me that in the whole marriage. They never once told me they care that I'm sad. This is a breakthrough. It's that level of communication. That's healthy. That's healthy. That's healthy. They feel heard, validated. That's healthy. A little thing is often, usually when that happens, the issue they were dealing with just goes away. Like, I don't care anymore. I just don't. It can stay up, but you're not like, okay, now I don't care. You can get the boat. Whatever. It's just arguing and fighting. So I like to distinguish between arguing and fighting. Do I need to pause there? Any question, comments? I figured you would throw something at me if you need them. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever experienced any of these dysfunctional patterns before in marriage? Just one person? Okay, well, I'm kidding. I see some nodding heads. Yeah, me too, right, me too. They're easy to get into. And you're not going to be surprised if you've ever heard me teach anything. You're going to hear me say next is, if that happens, that's worth exploring. Let's just think about it, reflect on that. Why is that my pattern? And if you'll focus on yourself and go, usually, I'm afraid of something. What am I afraid of? Why do I keep reacting that way? Why do I initiate conversation that way? Usually there's a fear that's driving this. Talk about the fear, get the fear healed, and do a lot better. I'll move on. I like to distinguish, now in American English, we often say argue, fight as synonyms, and I get it. But I like to distinguish them in communication because I think it's very helpful. I do. Arguing, what I call, is a constructive discussion, even if it's heated, where people express differing points of view with the goal of reaching a decision or understanding that both can accept. So you might say it's like heated negotiation, but it is a negotiation. Healthy arguments involve reasoning, listening, willing to compromise to find common ground. And even if emotions run high, the focus is on the issue. It's always on the issue. It's not on the person. It's always on the issue. That's one of the key signs for me of arguing. Like riding a bull, you're still on the bull. You're both riding it. You're kind of worked up, but it's about the issue. It's about the issue. It's not about anything else. Fighting is different. Fighting, you have let go of the issue. Now you're not about solving a problem. It's about winning. And a fight, the issue itself becomes secondary. The primary goal is proving your own superiority, asserting dominance, punishing the other person. It can involve blame, personal attacks, defensiveness, manipulation. Instead of resolving a disagreement, it escalates, it damages. Fighting is not good. So I like to think about a scale. So let's say normal conversation over hello, how are you? That's not at a 1, a 0 out of 10, that's a 1. That's just as calm basically as you can get. Argument goes at about a 5 or 6. When you get about that 7, 8, 9, 10, you're fighting. So if you find yourself in healthy relationships, teeter-tottering, like we often get around that 7 range, that's worth exploring. Why is it, do you think? If you find yourself going from the 3 or 4 to the 9, why is that? That's worth exploring. What's going on? I've met people before, again, I cover this in more in depth in my marriage workshop. I'm not going on it right now, but I met people who go, why do you do that? And they'll say, when I look through counseling, when it comes back down to it, they just were modeled that. That's how their parents did. They just yelled all the time. They didn't know any other way to do it. They didn't want to yell. They even said, I said, no, I don't like to do this. They're like, how else do I do it? They didn't know any better. So we don't assume, well, you're just Satan incarnate. They may be ignorant. Back to the boundaries I said a long time ago. I said, why can be boundaries hard to establish? Maybe you just weren't modeled them. Sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. Oh, well, here's ways to do this. There's different ways, Sometimes I'm afraid I won't listen to me, on and on. A lot of times you fight and you do things like this because you have built up pressure, built up wounds from the past. And so every time someone says, hello, you go, forget you. You're just primed and ready all this time. And all of a sudden it's like it's popping a water balloon. In the moment you come across as a lunatic, but your emotional wounded child is not a lunatic. He or she is wounded, come up all this past, for all this years. So the two people, John and Julie Gottman, they're like the Michael Jordans of marriage counseling of research. They're two Jewish people who have studied tens of thousands of couples. They have an institute. They bring them in and do the same questionnaire, the same stuff, and they have an enormous amount of data. And the Gottman research is really well known. And so what they find is when they study people, how they argue, how they fight, these are the things they recommend. If you do these things, they said like 99% of the time, it goes great. So here are your tips. If you want to have something of this controversial topic in your home, one is you have a gentle startup. So as much as possible, you begin the discussion calmly, respectfully, focus on your feelings rather than blame or criticism. I feel hurt when, not you never listen. The gentle startup is calm, watch your tone of voice, not for fear. Like I said, just right. Just take a deep breath. If you like visual aids, and I do, because I'm a visual learner, and maybe it's an appeal to you, but as a pastor, it appeals to me. If you go to a bedside at a hospital, I've been to a lot of hospital bedsides. They're really sick or they're about to die. What I have never done is walk in the hospital. What's up, Bill? How's it going? I start yelling and screaming. You don't do that. What kind of lunatic walks in and starts, are you a sinner? You walk in, you're calm, you're quiet, And I might kneel down, might pull up a chair. Hey, Bill, how's it going, bud? It's a gentle startup. Now, that doesn't mean Bill's fragile, but he might be. He might be in the right mental, emotional state. It's the same about your spouse. You're not assuming they're a fragile baby. You're just wanting to be, my analogy is, you take the disposition of someone who's being respectful and gentle. That's it. Not because they're a baby. If you're a Christian, it's because you're a Christian. But you're going to focus and listen. You might not mean to. You might not mean to. I'm not assuming you do mean to. Boy, it really hurts my feelings when I said we're going to have dinner at 6 and you said that sounds cool, I'll make it. And at 6:40 you come in and all the food's cold and I'm hungry, the kids have already eaten. It makes you feel very lonely. It makes you feel like I'm being dismissed. Can you help me understand why you're late? Can you help me understand what's the process there? That's just respectful, it's calm, I feel. Accept influence. This is a big one, especially for men. They found that men have the hardest time with this. This is the most difficult for dudes. Accept influence. That is being open to your spouse's perspective and willing to compromise rather than insisting on being right. Men have the hardest time. Another way they say it is this. Be influential. Be influenceable. Be influenceable. To use a biblical term, they're Jews, I'd say for Christian, is be humble. Is it? I've told men this before. Is it possible for your wife to be right? Is that in the realm of possibility? Now, I've counseled narcissists. So far, I think they've all been men. Yeah, I think so far they've all been men. And for them, they might go, well, like in theory, like they cannot, because narcissists are alive and well. But even if you're not narcissistic, when you feel defensive, they're not going to listen anyway. Who cares what their thought is? Then they say the couples that can accept influence both ways, even if it's not their specialty. I'm the one who does all the finances. You don't know anything about that. Unless you think your spouse is an absolute childish moron, which is how you're treating them, you should pause and listen. What are your thoughts? They might say, I don't really know. I don't know much about that field. But a humble spouse asks the question. This affects both of us. I want your input if you have any. If you have a gentle startup, you go in and realizing the other spouse might have a better idea than you did or a great perspective. 3, you use repair attempts if it goes off track. You can use humor, apologies, affectionate gestures, de-escalate tension, keep the discussion turned to a fight. You don't want to get that level. You can say things like, right there in the moment, I'm sorry, that might have sounded condescending or rude. That's not the way I meant it. Or I'm sorry that came across curt. I didn't mean to sound curt when I said that. Just right there in the moment. Those are repair attempts. I'm sorry. I interrupt you. I did not mean to interrupt you. I'm committed to not interrupting. It was an accident. I'm sorry. I got worked up for a second. You were saying what? About the thing. Just right then. It helps all the studies they prove it shows people slow down. Emotional self-regulation. Realizing when it's escalating, take breaks. Always take breaks if you need to take a break. Hey man, I'm losing my cool here. Can we take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or even an hour? Or can we come back tomorrow and talk about this? I don't want to overreact. I don't want to say stuff that's rude. I don't want to. I want to be proud of myself. I want the Lord Jesus to be proud of me. And right now, this topic is so painful to me or so sensitive to me or controversial. Or maybe even past woundedness from my childhood. What difference is it? That is, whatever it is, I'm aware that I'm what we call in psychology, I'm dysregulating. I'm losing the capacity to make wise choices based on my emotional state. I refuse to lose my cool with you because that's my deal. It's not your deal. I'm not going to cuss or even, and I'm having a hard time myself. So please, I need to take a walk. I need to take a break, and then I'll come back. Now that's the key is I'm owning me. I'm owning my stuff. I'm owning myself. I didn't blame the other person because it is your fault, not their responsibility. It's your responsibility to calm down. Well, if you would just stop. No, that's false. I'm going to calm down at my rate. 2, I'm committing to coming back. I want to come back because I want to hear what you have to say. I'm so worked up right now. I don't do it that way. You keep focusing on the issue. You don't attack the person. Don't ever call names. Don't ever show contempt. Don't ever character assassinate. You're always like this. You're just a loser. You're just late all the time. You're lazy. You're no good. You're just disgusting. When you've done that, you are way off track. And every human being outside of a person, every normal, healthy person, They will feel the attack, and the number one response to attack is to defend themselves. They're going to defend themselves by coming right back at you, or they're going to defend themselves by leaving the conversation, fleeing. They're going to do themselves by freezing down and having a cell. They're going to feel attacked. So don't ever attack, ever. Even if you've been attacked, you might need to take a deep breath and go back to number one. You might not mean to, but that really hurts my feelings when you call me that or talk to me that way. I'd run to talk about this, but I want to do so respectfully and gently. Are you able to talk about the issue? I feel like it's gotten way off topic. I feel now you're talking about me and my character. Can we commit to talking about the subject matter? Well, you blah, blah. Okay, so that's my answer. I'm going to take a break then. So we can talk about when calmer, and you're done. Active listening and validation. Listen to them. Look at their eyeballs. Put your phone down. That's when you go, I hear you saying. And of course, just mutual respect. I mean, even a disagreement. You respect your spouse isn't the enemy. Yes, they are. No, not if you're married, they're not. They might be hurting your feelings, but they're not Satan incarnate, and you got to make sure they burn forever. So they might in that moment be disrespectful, but in general, if you can take the disposition, even then Jesus says, love your enemies, right? Matthew 5, Luke 6. Let me pause there. Any question or comments about, I'm going to research that. Anything?
Does it get easier with practice?
Like her face. See, it's sassy. Does it get easier with practice?
Well, because
Yeah.
I would love to be able to
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
do that way. Somebody's attacking. The rest of
Does it get easier with practice? Yeah, the answer is yeah, it does. It really does get easier with practice. It does. And there's no way around today's sermon I'm going to talk about. There's no way around this without practicing it. There's no way. I can memorize every word in 14 languages, but until I'm practicing this, when the emotions come up and I go, what's the healthy thing to do right now? But if I were in therapy too with a person, I would say, unless you want to do it right now, I would say to a person, I would say, which ones of these do you think are the most difficult for you and why? And we would pinpoint with, surgical accuracy, why is this, if you said repair attempts or what is it exactly about that? And I guarantee probably there's wounds on there that need to be addressed and fears. Now, there are also statistically, no, I'm just a psychopath, David. I'm just a narcissist. No, I really do think they're stupid and worse than me. That's real. I know people like that in my life right now. Just probably speaking, I lean towards the you're probably wounded stage. And so then, of course, that's worth exploring and being more compassionate to say what's going on there. And if you can do that. Another thing I would encourage people if they have a difficulty in this is trying your best. I'm going to switch modalities to internal family systems for a little bit. That's when you have the self and different parts. In the internal family systems, I would say, if there's certain people, so let's say spouse or certain topics that tend to get you the most afraid, I would encourage when you can, before the conversation, to get yourself out as much as possible. Go through the IFS terms of addressing all the parts, everyone take a deep breath, step down, getting calm and curious and collected, getting your thoughts in order. And that might include even writing down some 5 or 6 main points you're going to make. It might mean ahead of time, I'm talking about using ChatGPT or using something else to go, give me some affirmations right now to myself, to arrive, my adult self, before I step in there. Because I don't want my wounded, scared child to step in first. Now, if the wounded child comes up, you get better through therapy to realize I'm starting to feel the fear, and that's okay. The key is not that I feel calm every second. As in, I don't know anybody who does that. My heart races once a year. My wife and I have an argument once every decade. I'm kidding. No, every once we don't have many. I don't like it either. The key is not that I feel calm. The key is my behavior. That's all that matters. What comes out of my mouth, my facial expression, my body language. Do I show that I'm with you and for you and doing my best to listen, even if I fundamentally disagree or not? But I might leave the situation and go, I was so scared. That really triggered my childhood. Mom and daddy did this. That matters. It's just the key here is in the moment. So those are tips to remind ourselves, I can feel this, but my key is this. And I'm a Christian. Christians do this even if I feel this. So it's not either or. It's just in the moment, I want to make sure I'm doing everything I can. The other day, my son went through a very, very unfortunate thing with someone who was extremely mean to him. So much, I called and put that other guy on a speakerphone. I've never done it in my life. So in those moments, as I encouraged my son then and after he was very, very, very upset, and then still, he's calming down, to keep saying, I told him, I said, son, with the other guy on the speakerphone, I know I wanted him to hear, I wanted him to be shamed, an attempt to help him see what he had just done, how horrible and wretched and sinful it was, to say, in the videotape of life, God will watch all of this. He is watching it right now. And son, I want you to feel proud of what you've done in this moment. And inside, he felt everything you'd feel when someone's done what he's done to my son. That's all normal. Afterwards, then dad took over to say, when he's shaking, crying, angry, all the raging, all the parts go, absolutely, well, I'm there to support him. But in the moment, it's in the moment, can you control, can you have enough regulation to behave in such a way that you leave going, at least I don't regret what I did. And you can't regret how you feel, that's how you feel. But I can't regret what I did. So on that exactly point, there are times I've told people, if you cannot close your mouth, then you're not ready for the conversation because you want to be Christ-like. Now, maybe there's an emergency, you got to do what you got to do. But in general, no. If all you're going to do, not you, but if all a person is going to do is when I see that son, I'm going to blah, blah, then you're not ready. You're not ready. I didn't say you feel upset. I said if it comes out of your mouth as cussing, tirade, or violence, you're not ready. I've heard many people, if I see them in public, I'll beat them. Well, then don't see them in public. Don't go near them. You need time to heal and get the rage out, the sadness out. And that's a real thing. That's back to that being the emotional self-regulation, to know what your own capacity is in the moment. And that's key. See, a lot of people feel shame. They love to shame themselves. That's a very popular thing, particularly amongst females. They love to say bad things about themselves. But this is one I'm about to say, another example that is so ridiculous to shame yourself about this, because this is healthy. And it's this. Healthy, mature people know when it's too much for them. So they don't go, oh, I know I always ought to be 100% in the moment. Well, you can't be. No one is outside of Jesus. Healthy, mature people realize I'm self-aware enough to know I've got certain wounds at certain levels and certain things are going to trigger me more than others. And I'm going to do the best I can with what I've got. That's what a healthy, mature person says. But shame doesn't listen. There's no credit there. It's just, I know I should never, ever have any problems. What are you talking about? Especially, I know your childhood. Yeah, you should have problems. So sometimes the very best you can do in the moment, the most Christ-like thing is in that very moment with that dude in front of you, that girl in front of you, you didn't stab him. You didn't slap him. You didn't punch him. Everything in me wanted to know. And I go, praise Jesus. I'm not kidding. Or if you say, no, if I see that person, I'll kill him, then don't hang out with a person. Know yourself, like Shakespeare, I know thyself. Know what you can do. That's healthy. That's healthy. And then, yes, you want to process that, therapy, grieving, whatever, get to the place where you're able not to be so triggered by anger and rage. But that's healthy. And sometimes, another thing is, by the way, when it comes to spousal stuff is, I've known many couples, they say, David, and I've known many this way, they're so dysfunctional in their past, their relationship, they're so argumentative all the time. The critical parent, child, like that's all they know. They've done it for 10, 15, 20 years or whatever. At that level, they cannot do it themselves. I've told them, I said, there's nothing you can do because the rut, the groove, and the muddy, dried road in your brain and that person's brain is so ensconced, you're not going to get out of it. You need a third party. Someone's got to come back from a reset point and say, okay, and I've done this many, many times. Let's start from ground zero on how to discuss a disagreement. So you're going to say this, and you're going to listen. And I'm going to interrupt you if you interrupt her or vice versa. I've done it many times. They'll say, can you agree? That usually, most of the time, I'll say, it's very important to do it exactly the way I say it. And I'll do it over and over, just a role play for them. Now, when it happens, every single time afterwards, they feel so much better. But the pattern, they needed a third party. They needed a third party, that's it. If I slouch down on my chair for 20 years outside everyone told me that, I see a physical therapist, I go, we're going to start from ground zero. Put your feet flat on the floor. Now, I want you to sit up straight. Someone's got to train me how to sit up correctly. That's all I know. So there's no shame in that. It's just, yeah, we got in a rut. Pray, and I usually by that point, we know, especially we're Christians, yes, but praise God. You said, let's go get some help. Praise God. That's what healthy people do. That's what healthy people, it's the immature babies walking around. I don't need all that stuff. They're immature. I guarantee you, they're immature. Nobody doesn't need anybody else. It's ridiculous. That is some input, some advice, something. It's ridiculous. And guys are the worst when it comes to therapy. I don't need all the emotional, feely, goony, warmy, goo. I'm sad for you. Yeah, you do. And the fact, the more you protest, the more I know you need it. I like to pick on guys because I am. I'm not picking on us. I am. I should have been a gentle startup. Dear gentlemen, I'm kidding. Any questions about that? Any comments about it? Arguing and fighting?
It really forced your spouse. Therapy. I mean, they might go. So
You can't force your spouse to get therapy, right? They might go, but that's exactly right. You know, that's exactly right. You cannot force them. Can't force them ever. You can ask it and you can demand it. In my view, it is a healthy, legitimate need of a marriage to have, I have like 5 lists, non-negotiables of a Christian marriage that are grounds for divorce. One of them is an insistent kind of agape love. I think it is impossible, in my view, impossible to say you have biblical Jesus agape love for your spouse and you refuse ever go to counseling if someone thinks there's necessity for it. But to me, nope, those are contradictory terms. There's no way, which means that's grounds for divorce. In my opinion, that's sound. You can demand it. We need it. I love you. I've given, 50 wives in my life exact role play advice on how to say it. And 50% of the times it works, 50% of the times it doesn't.
would you say you on it? We're not going to make it.
Yeah. Would you say we're not going to make it if we go? Yeah, something like, I would say after if they refuse, I want to ask them, why do they refuse? And they go, well, blah, blah. And then the final consequence is, I would always tell them, it makes me very sad and maybe angry and frustrated that you won't go. I feel very hurt. It communicates to me that I'm not worth it to you and our marriage isn't. And I have very low hopes that our marriage will make it. Oh yeah, that's exactly what I would say. That is a legitimate, healthy need. I didn't say I wouldn't crack. I said I want us to go and have the healthiest marriage possible. Now, I go through other role play, but yeah, sure you can, but you can't make them. You can't make them. In fact, you don't want to make them, right? Because then there's a parent-child or a slave relationship, and I'll go. Now, I've had a couple of those. It worked out a little bit. Sometimes they came to one session, and I always think I got them for one session, and I try my best to build them up and try to make it safe. This isn't that weird. You can do it. Some come back, some don't. You can't make them. Yeah.
One thing that I found somebody's probably work.
Thank you for that. So you're saying one thing you've done is you try to take the perspective. If someone tells you something, maybe it's a type of criticism, what we call it in psychology, reframe it. So you try to see it from the perspective that God might be trying to say something to you.
Right.
Or you said God is speaking. I would say God might be speaking to you. Not that God is speaking to you, because people can be people and they just have free will and they can be sinful. That demons could use them too. But I love the perspective God could be using this message to help me. That sure, yeah, I agree. That's a good way to think about it. It could be that. That's a great perspective.
That helps.
It helps you be more influenceable. Yeah, not be so angry right off the bat. That's right. That's good. Because the truth is, if what they're saying is wrong, you dismiss it. No, that's not true. You dismiss it. But if it's true, it's helped you. It's helped you. Hey, David, your zipper's down nonstop. Let me look. Nope, it's not. But if it's true, I didn't criticize your zipper ability tie up or downer. I'm just saying, you may not realize this, but every single time we talk about the food, you start cussing. Or every time we blah, blah, every time you interrupt me, if you're influenceable and you go, maybe God's helped me I need to not be so interrupting all the time. Or I like that. I like that mindset. Anything else? Page 20?
And it's the charity too, and that shows that you're open to, like you said, your child.
Yes. Where's it coming from? So I repeat that online. That's good. So yeah, that's right. So it shows maturity to be the person who's open to hearing it. It does so. That's exactly right. It does maturity. It takes healthy maturity. And again, a lot of people do not have that because they're so wounded. When someone says something, disagree with it, the only part of them that hears it the most is the wounded child who feels attacked because they're already so wounded. It's like an internal sunburn. If they mention the slightest thing, they go, ugh, it just hurts. People who don't struggle with that, for whatever reason, maybe they had a better childhood or not as wounded or not as much trauma, they don't receive it nearly as scary. People who have not been through trauma don't understand people who have been through trauma. What's the big deal? All I said was, can you please scoot over? All I did was try to give them a hug and they shrunk back. They don't know the difference. People going through trauma do know the difference. Like what I've done was Superman to get near you. You don't realize what I've gone through But that so maturity is also helping you realize people have very different kinds of level of trauma. Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you said about that. And also, like you're saying, I also like the fact that when you're going to a spouse, it's not just surface level, it's the next, what have they been through? And that can help a lot. It can help. If you assume that their defensiveness, I don't mean defensive that someone has a defense for what they've done. I mean, they can never be wrong or something. If you ask more questions like, not in this moment, you have to be the therapist, but if you ask more questions of what they're going through, what they might be afraid of, what causes them the most fear, what makes you sad, you're going to get to something that's usually driving that behavior. Yeah, that's right. A bad day at work, something. Yeah.
So I've allowed myself to become everything.
So you're saying you have grown to become more influenceable. Yes. You spent so many years of your life being solo on your own, and you've been growing so much in this process with Diane. That's fantastic. I love that. I love that testimony, because that is a process. It does take practice. It takes one of my favorite words. It takes courage. It takes courage to grow. It takes courage to be humble. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It doesn't take courage to be defensive. It takes courage to be vulnerable, because I might be hurt more. Running away, fighting, cussing, you're not being courageous at all. Courage is say, maybe I need to grow up here a little bit and learn a little, that takes courage. So good for you, allowing yourself the capacity. And that's another good example too. You say, I grew up, I'm not, whatever, not listening to other people, I'm always on myself. That's true. Literally learning the capacity to open up what we call in the business bonding, be able to have emotional bonding with another human. If you're not used to that, that is like walking on Mars it is a very bizarre, different thing. And this is very common with children who have been orphans. It's very common when people didn't have mom or dad who abandoned them or cut them off or was not emotionally attached to them. They don't know what emotional attachment feels like. And when they start to have it, they get anxious. They don't know what do I do? They don't know and so it takes therapy to say, this is what it's supposed to be. This is what it feels like to be loved and lovable. And that opens up, but that's scary.
But then
That's good.
They complete.
Well,
No.
Yeah, they complete me. No, they don't. I hope not. Yeah, nope. Yeah, you had me until complete. Nope. You compliment me. Doesn't ring like Jerry Maguire. You compliment me. That's true. Thank you. Say that again, Jerry. Yeah, that much healthier movie if it said that. You compliment. We're two holes, and So real quickly, we'll go. Well, I'll introduce this and to ponder this next week. Is that cool? Ponder real quickly. Steps to establish and maintain boundaries. You can admit there's a problem. Denial doesn't do it. Identify specific boundary problems in your marriage. Identify them and then take full responsibility, whatever it is you have done to make it worse. Try your best to figure out where the boundary problem came from in the first place, what needs you're trying to get met. It's really good to have some support group or therapist to help you with this, and you practice baby boundaries. I'm going to come back next week and cover that slowly. I just want to encourage you this week, think about any kind of boundaries in marriage probably might have, and to read this list. Really, I encourage you to get homework, prayerfully consider if there's any areas in your life you can get better at. You're trying to explore what you do, not what your spouse might do, but what you do. I'm going to say a prayer for us to wrap up. Any questions or comments real quickly? Next week, we're going to start a new section of the study, which is boundaries in parenting. Boundaries in parenting. So talk about how to be a good parent or grandparent to your kids next week. Let me pray for us. Thank you, Lord Jesus, so much for the ability to have the study, for healthiness. You taught us how to have healthy, respectful, loving boundaries, even when we disagree. And God, we're asking for that capacity. For those of us that are married or want to be married, help us be healthy individuals as much as possible. Help us communicate as best as we can. Help us listen. Help us love. Help us be influenceable. God, we know that a lot of us have a lot of woundedness. Help us work on that healing and comforting the wounded part of us so that our adult talks and behaves, not our wounded child. We love you. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you.